Hi, Melissa.
So excited to chat with you.
I've been looking forward to this all morning. I've got my tea, I've got my setup, and I've been just sitting here going, what time? What time? Are we going to talk about all this fun stuff?
I know, I'm so excited to talk with you because, as you know, I work with parents of highly sensitive children, and I know that you also have a wealth of knowledge, not just about sensitive children, but about what we call the New Earth children.
Yes.
And I know that our conversation today might stretch the comfort zone for some of our listeners, but the reason that I wanted to have you here is because you are really a renowned expert in this field. And there are a lot of articles on Facebook and the internet kind of talking about indigo and crystal and rainbow and diamond children, but they are not well sourced. And you are a well source. And so I really wanted to have this conversation with you. So before we dive in too deeply, can you just share a little bit about your background so that the listeners have a sense of where you're coming from and your expertise?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I have this really eclectic background. I am a historian by degree in medieval and Renaissance history. So I was going through the Reformation. I was going through the Age of Enlightenment, the Renaissance, and looking at what do we do when really big changes have to happen. And then I would sort of dilly-dally in other areas of history, but it was applied towards education. So I became a high school history teacher. And that's really boring in the States because you're just working with US history and that not a lot of global history, not a lot of world history or ancient history. So I was bored. So I left and I started working in the arena of sales and marketing and trade show training people on how to bring events together and know that you had 2.5 days to capture the attention of somebody and leave an impression on them. What kind of impression do you want to leave? And then when I started having kids, I had 3 kids in 5 years, and they're all really energetically sensitive. They are very different, and they all have very unique styles of learning. And I knew I was never going to be a homeschooler, because that was not my thing. So when I found a little school in Bend, Oregon that I loved, and there were these 2 teachers and a 3rd teacher down the hall that wanted to start something different, I became sort of the momentum, and we created a K-8 magnet school in Bend, Oregon it was the first democratic school, literacy based, and all of it was based on how we all learn. How do we learn as parents? How do we learn as children? How do we learn in school? How do we meet these markers within a school system? And then, marriage, children, everything changes. And I have always coached on the side young adults when they can't go home, when things are going wrong. I was the one that would sort of sit down with them. From the time I was 25, they were my peers. And then as I got older, they still stayed 18 to 25, maybe 30. And so I've always been the young adult magnet. And I went into therapeutic care and started working with residential placement facilities so it might have been around independent living skills or supporting sobriety. And then adolescent, high school, long-term boarding schools. And the one that really sort of brought it all together for me was in 2008, 2009, 2010, I worked for the Aspen Institute out of Salt Lake City, and it was a 14-bed psychiatric assessment facility where we were working with the beginning of Asperger's and trying to define, the markers on what that looks like. So we just had nothing but 14 to 16-year-old boys coming through constantly. They weren't looking at it from girls' point of view at that time. It was mostly boys. And then from 2010 till now, I've been running my own coaching practice, working with parents in introducing sensitivity, introducing what do you do when your kid is telling you they need something different. And so I've developed this 15-skill coaching manual on how to teach parents some of the energy components of what happens when you're sensitive and we have to understand them a different way. So it's sort of like a bunch of things all put together, but it puts me in the spot of having this intelligent mind, gathering information and seeing patterns. And so my passion is these new energies that have been coming in since the 70s. in these 10, 20, 10 years, 20 years, or 5-year blocks, and they have really different signatures. So I do want to stretch us a little bit and start talking about some of what these energetic signatures are all about.
I'd love to.
How's that for a big one?
Yeah, absolutely. So you say that starting around the 70s is when these sort of, would you call them groups of energies, started to kind of emerge at the same time?
This just challenges things on so many levels. It's sort of like you have to come up with the concept of seeding, that there's actually a strategic purpose for different energy signatures coming in through the family systems at different times. So the indigo, everyone knows indigo girls, indigo energy. Indigos are really, they're truth. They're like, no bullshit. Things have to be, if your words are saying this and your actions are over here, you can watch an indigo just sort of lose it. Because what they understand is they understand what really matters, and they can look where there's discrepancies. So they started to come in mass in the 70s. However, there were scouts. There's all these pre-planners, and I would put myself down there. I was born in 59. You're going to get in there, you're going to become an educator, and you're going to be that little beacon, that little lighthouse for that 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old who goes, what am I supposed to do when I don't know why I need to go to college, or I can't talk to my parents, or, relationships aren't working, or I hear voices, but I'm not schizophrenic. I actually read energy, and you go, oh, okay. And so we become these resources. So scouts come ahead and they become resources. So indigos really started coming in the 1969, 1970, through 1985. They just came in mass. So they're really seated within the Generation Xers.
Yeah.
So Generation Xers are, they're visual. They get things done. They build technology. They collect data. And when you cross them, they're like, yeah, the sword comes out. No. And you cannot cross a warrior when they're telling you you're wrong.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, and it sounds like you're describing me. And I've always sort of known, for as long as I've heard this term indigo, and for those people that are listening that are like, I have no idea what you're even talking about. What we're really talking about here are sort of waves of children as they're born that obviously grow into adults that come through with a specific purpose, would you say, right? They're sort of born at a certain time in history to either create a change in our society, in our political system, in our cultural system, and they are generally challenging to be with when they're young, and really grow into sort of leaders and change makers.
Definitely. I mean, think Judd Nelson in The Breakfast Club. Think Heath Ledger in 10 Things I Hate About You. Think Matthew. Can't even think about it. I'm drew a blank. Sorry about that. Think of these rabble rousers, the ones that they could see the world through a different lens. They knew what they were going to land on their feet by the time they were in their 20s and 30s, but their adolescence were challenging, and not without trauma and pain. The indigos usually have a lot of things happen to them where they say no, and the world goes, shh, don't do that. So it's been really challenging on a lot of levels. And I like that you said that they come in with a purpose. They come in with a skill set. Indigos are intuitive. They are readers. They see patterns and they watch a flow. Like, I can just tip this teacher over and watch the whole class go. And so they like to play in that arena. And that makes them really good business owners, really good managers, really excellent at leading. So indigo is like a warrior energy. Yeah. And it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing me to a T. I was born in 1980. I was very challenging as a child. My mom, who I believe, and she believes also that she was also one of those original forerunners, used to tell the story that she would tell my older brother don't climb on that, or that's not for climbing. And he would listen, and she would say to me, that's not for climbing. And I would look her right in the eye and keep on going.
Yeah, and go, I know you think that I'm not going to do that, but you don't know what you're talking about because I'm okay.
Yeah.
This shows up in the schools. This is where we came up with the oppositional defiant
Yes.
kid, which meant that they were really good athletes or really good artists or really good historians or readers, but they weren't going to do traditional education. And so, I was the California experimental curriculum girl of the 70s, like pick whatever falls into the category of English and take it. But it was the only way I got through high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really smart, but I couldn't get through high school.
Well, and there's something about not wanting to play the game that I think really comes up here. And
Yes.
I work a lot with parents whose children have been diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder. And when they tell me what is going on for that child and the environment that the child is in, I often say, there's nothing wrong with this child. They don't have a disorder. They're looking for their own healthy power, and they're not being given the opportunities to express it. And so they are going to push back. These are children that are not going to give up who they are to acquiesce to those around them. There are some highly sensitive children who do acquiesce when they're told that they can't do things. They do sort of shut down and turn inward, and I hate to even say it, but they almost become a shell of who they are. It's like the light in their eye dims out. But
I call it turtling. They pull in and they hunker down. And we have a lot of them. That's really become the most pervasive method of trying to get attention.
Yeah.
And we'll get there
Yeah.
in this discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So let's keep it moving. So the indigos are sort of the first.
They're the first, and they're the disruptors.
Yeah.
If it's not working, they're gonna get themselves kicked out. They're gonna tip things over. They're gonna pick a fight. And then what's really interesting is the next generation that came in, and they started in the 1990s, late 88, 89, 90 is sort of the marker for the en masse. And that is the crystalline or the crystal kids. And everyone knows indigos, but they don't understand what crystal means. So crystal is a frequency. It's a vibration. They are feelers. And so everything in their world is either I feel love, or I don't feel love. I feel your attention. I don't feel your attention. I feel like I belong here. I don't feel like I belong here. If they can go into school, and if the teacher isn't someone they know, they just put their head down and they draw. And they just bide their time because they know that they can't leave, but they aren't happy and nothing's working. And so when these crystal kids started going through the system, they started having diagnoses like auditory processing disorder. They put a lot of crystalline kids in Title I. The Title I reading program was built for them because they're not reading. They're not doing the words that are so important to the baby boomers and the Gen Xers. And the crystals are in the millennials. So the crystals and millennials are like, no. And they're also pod kids, which, they were raised in daycares. They were raised in preschools. They were raised in soccer after school, karate after school. And so everything is about gathering 10 kids together and sitting them on a mat, doing an activity with them, and adults come and go. Caregivers come and go. So it's like Rugrats. They look up and they go, yeah, that one brings food. That one picks me up and takes me home and puts me to bed at night. She calls herself mom, but I have so many people that take care of me that she doesn't get to pull that trump card every once in a while. Like, hey, I'm your mother. So, because I have 14 different caregivers and coaches and teachers. But what they do know is they know how to collaborate with other like-minded souls. So like Rugrats, they're pods. They date in pods. They live in pods. They like having other people around them that feel comfortable. If it's dissonant or if it's out of alignment with them, they won't go. They'll quit a job. They'll quit school. They'll walk out of a class. They'll refuse.
And so I'm thinking about some colleagues and friends that I have that sound like they might be, this crystalline energy. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that they are they're not that warrior, bull in a china shop, nothing's going to stop me energy that the indigos have. They seem to have a softer energy about them where they're here to get things done, but it's more in a collaborative way, whereas the indigo is maybe a little more on their own and a little more fierce in their determination. Does that feel accurate?
You've got your hand right on it. So think of a sword when you think of indigo. Think of mental acuity, cut through things. When you go to the crystal, think water. You can put them in a glass, they'll hold in a glass. You can spread it on the ground, they'll go into the ground. You can freeze it, it'll turn into ice. They're very malleable. However, they will only become malleable around what is comfortable for them. So when they're in a family system where there's a mom or a dad talking all the time, or there's a lot of expectations and a lot of pressure, sometimes the biggest challenge for me in therapeutic care and coaching was when parents said, he's got an IQ of 142. So I'm putting him in a private Catholic, high-performing academic environment. And he won't do his homework. He can't organize his backpack. So we see scattered executive functioning. We see scattered IQ. So processing is usually, one thing I noticed about the crystals is that their processing is really low. Hangs out around 89 to 92. And then visual spacing and perceptual reasoning and all these things are up there. So they're super bright, but their Hertz level of how they live on this earth stays at a really low, very common place. And it means that everything is sequential for them the way that they need it to be.
Yeah. And
you can't move them very fast.
Right. Right. Can you remind me again about the years that you said late?
1992, probably like 98-ish. And it's not, this is what I just learned in the last 2 to 3 months, is that just because we have this marker where the indigos landed, then now we have this marker where the crystals landed. What we know now is that the crystals have the energy of the warrior, but they also do it now vibrationally. And so when we shift and we add to the rainbows, it's like then we start to build, we're morphing into a different awareness. And so what we're seeing is our highly sensitive numbers through Dr. Elaine Ahrens are going up.
Yes.
You know, she's changing her research, and we're seeing an increase in sensitivity, reactivity.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's keep going. So we've had the crystals, and then come the rainbows.
The rainbows. So if we know that the crystals are vibratory, their frequency, I call them the frequency of love. You know, like whatever matters to them, they do. Now, before we go to the rainbows, there's one more piece, is that if you overwhelm a crystal, you cannot get them to do schoolwork. You cannot get them to listen. You can't get them to get out of the car. They simply hunker down, or they draw, or they play on their video games, and they don't make any eye contact with you. And you ask them a question, they go, I don't know. Because they don't know how to tell you, because no matter what they say, you can't hear them as a parent. So they become very just biding their time until they can get a little distance between the pressures.
And so that's why it looks like there's an auditory processing, because they're non-responsive, but it's not an auditory issue. It's an energetic overwhelm that they're really. It's
energetic overwhelm, and it's a lack of, think of dissonance. I'm in a classroom with other people that their energy cannot work with mine, and I can't concentrate. And then what we see with crystals is that no focus at all, scattered all over the place, and hyper focus. Yes. They can work, the little boys can work with their trucks for 2 hours. Girls can sit and build beading and make these incredible things with their hands, or bring visual into place, or they can sit and play a video game for 4 hours or on the screen. So they have focus and no focus.
So are these children often misdiagnosed as ADD or ADHD?
Always. Yeah. ADD, ADHD, Asperger's. Now they're sort of going to the autism spectrum, and so it's a real high functioning, but still there's something quirky. They don't understand what. They require a softer tone of voice and a more open heart. And so you can get a long way by just showing up and sitting next to them and breathing with them without talking to them.
So I want to ask you a question, even though quite sure I know what you're going to say. Does medicating these children work?
Well, their drug of choice is cannabis. And I think that's the most significant thing to remember, is that with these earth children, as they become more intense, as they become, their drug of choice, especially with crystals in millennials, is cannabis. Because what cannabis does is it takes the pressure off of the mental lists, and then it relaxes the cortisol in the parasympathetic and sympathetic. So it makes it more tolerable for them to be in environments that are highly dissonant. Right. So you have these wake and bakers. They smoke in the morning, they smoke at lunch, they smoke to get through the afternoon, they smoke to go home and have dinner with the folks, they smoke to play video games. And it keeps them in a place where they're numb, yes, but they're also unreactive. Because they can also be burst in energy of anger. They can punch walls. You know, you can push a crystal kid so far, and then they just go bam. Yeah. So they either isolate, they avoid, or they explode, like all kids.
Sure.
Okay. So their drug of choice is going to be cannabis, and then when you put pharmaceuticals in them, they're rocking them all the time. They work for a little while, then they don't, and you don't know how to medicate except for to dull them down. Yeah. Okay. Now, rainbows. Yeah. Rainbows started coming in 98, and there was a 5-year period. It was just really intense and really, really, really intentionally planted. And they're the blenders. You see these kids, and we can see them as they started to go through. They're the ones that wanted to wear costumes to school. They're the ones whose best friends are boys or girls, or the old man sitting at the bench every day when they're waiting for the bus. They don't see the difference in color. They don't see the difference in gender. They don't see the difference in education or family background. They don't see anything. They identify their body as, I have a male side and I have a female side. And sometimes my female side likes to do this, and sometimes my male side likes to do this. And so they're completely blenders. So they take all of what we regimentally, especially the indigos, compartmentalize, put this over here, this one goes over here. The rainbows are just like, put it all together. And so they're really easygoing. They're super easygoing. They like to have friends. They could care less about school. They like school if it's interesting. If it's not interesting, they just bide their time and they find something to do and they make friends. They are the blenders of our culture.
Yeah. And is the term rainbow given to them? Is there any association with the LGBTQIA movement? In other words, are these children non-binary? Is there a lot of
They're definitely non-binary. And the reason that they're called rainbow is because you can turn a crystal in the spectrum and you can see every color at any given time. They reflect everything. So they cannot choose one or the other because they hold all of them. If that makes sense, they literally hold all of that. So these are our Gen Zers. So Gen Z starts here with the rainbows, and then it goes into the younger diamonds. So these rainbows are also, they need private schools. They aren't functioning. They don't really want to read. And what we know about crystals, rainbows, and diamonds is that the most egregious thing you can do to them is put them in an industrial education system that's linear. Yeah. And then when you come in and you go, well, he can't read. He's 9 years old and he still can't read a book. He is also doing Reiki someone falls in the playground and they're rubbing their hands and they're going on the knee, and the teacher's like, what are you doing? I don't know. If I put my hands here, it feels better. Mm-hmm. And the teacher's like, what are you doing? And so we have a lot of different conflictual old thought patterns on how children should be raised and educated, and new forms coming where nothing works.
Yeah. And it's also, our educational system is not that old. It's not like it's this ancient system where we had public schools for thousands of years. It's right. A really new structure, especially in the span of human history.
In the span of human history, and the reason I call it industrial is that the sheer purpose of the American Education Association is to create, in 12 years, a person who understands authority and does what they're told when the authority tells them what to do. Millennials will watch someone go by and you go, "Why I need you to do this?" And they'll go, "So."
Yeah. Okay, so it
I'm,
leads me to a question, because I hear a lot of parents making statements and articles on the internet about how the millennial generation are whiny and they don't want to move out of their parents' house and they're not motivated to work, and a lot of older generations bemoaning millennials. So my question is sort of two-part. One, is it accurate, or is it a really unhealthy take on who these children are? And two, are you saying that all millennials are rainbows or crystals, or is it a small percentage? Can you clarify how many?
those are such good questions. Okay, so first and foremost, millennials get this bad rap because what we are really looking at is an old paradigm of when I say jump, you say high, how high. And what we know is that there's this definitive marker somewhere around 85, 95, where the world sort of, the kids who came into the world at that time said, "Who do you think you are when you say jump? What are you talking to me? You think I'm going to jump? And why would you say that? And I don't understand." And then it's like roar. So we have old work styles, old concepts meeting new. And we have to be able to hold the attention of somebody who is trying to let you know that you're in dissonance with them. So that means that they're trying to teach us what collaboration looks like, what resonance looks like, what things look like when they're moving in a more natural state. And so we have these markers of pain, these markers of conflict in parenting styles, in employment, in education, where we don't know what to do. But when we let go of the old expectations and we drop in, then they open up and they blossom and they teach us what they see. They're highly creative. The crystals are all of the creators and the inventors over thousands of years. They're the Einsteins. They're the Michelangelos. They're the ones who see things and feel them and put them in place. So that's what we're really looking at is that. Now, whether they're actual, do I mean millennials and crystals simultaneously? No. I like working within the historical context of the generations because if you look at Mary Donohue's work on generations in the workplace, or you look at anyone who's defining the markers and what was important historically within these 10 to 20 years, or these roughly 20-year periods of times, these seedings are within it, but that doesn't mean the whole population. It means that those that chose to come in and start to push this huge momentum that was going this way, they're trying to turn it and take it a different way.
Okay.
So the piece that I would put down within millennials, crystals, rainbows, and diamonds is that they're the perfect examples of nonviolent behavior. So whether you go to Gandhi, whether we go to Martin Luther King, somebody comes at you, they're like, rah, their position is to just sit down and wait it through and say, "I don't understand why you're doing that. I really hope you don't hurt me. And I'm not going to do anything about it." And we don't know what to do with that. We see it in classrooms. "I'm going to refuse to participate." We see it at home. "I'm not going to school anymore." We're not talking about a couple of missed days at school. We're talking about full semesters of wouldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
And so what they've chosen to do is say, my world is really important. And if you can't see it and you don't understand it, then I'm not going to play because I have a world here to create.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you speak a little more about the diamonds?
Diamonds are somewhere like 2010.
Okay.
So they're 9, 10, maybe 2009. I call them the little Buddhas because if you walk around and you look at the babies in grocery stores and they've got these huge eyes and you look at them and they go, and your whole body goes, "Oh, hi." And now they're 5 and they're 7 and they're 10 and they got their little mobile play toys, or they're on mom or dad's phone and they're just like walking around, and then they'll sit down to you and you'll look over at them and they'll look up and they go, "Hi, so you're cool." And I go, "Thanks." And then they go, "Yeah." You ask them questions like, "So what are you going to do?" They go, "I don't know." And then they go right straight back. They're just unconditional love. They are the brightest form of all that we've been building towards. And the piece that we have to be able to understand, Melissa, is that they're going to adapt in where they can. And at any point where they go, "This ground is not fertile, this environment is not good," they're going to leave. So what we have to prepare ourselves for is that they might have had a really good toddler years. They might have had really good elementary school years. But if high school doesn't start to change for them, they're just going to leave. And they're going to leave rapidly and easily because they don't have any commitment to being here. And I think that's what we're starting to see in the rainbows, as well as we're seeing teen suicide going up. We're seeing, attempts to sort of like end it. I don't want to be here. And what we're not understanding is that it's so painful for them that we have to change the way we expect, the way we subjugate, the way we program, in order for them to feel freer. So they're all warriors. They just do it differently.
Yeah, got it.
And they're so brave and so strong to bring this culture into something different.
Yeah. So I have 2 more questions. I'm going to kind of ask them together, and I think that they sort of dovetail. One is, how do you know all of this stuff? How like it doesn't seem like there are a lot of books that are written about this or a lot of clinical research done about it. So that's kind of part 1. And then part 2 is, so if we've got indigos, crystals, diamonds, and rainbows, or rainbows and diamonds, what comes next?
I believe that we've been preparing this planet, this world of ours, for the diamond energy to come in mass. I mean, we're really looking at being able to hold this brilliant light of unconditional love. We knew about it in the 60s when we were saying, it's about peace and love. Lennon knew about it through the Beatles. It's about this vibration of love. And so we have these different markers of souls coming and trying to prepare us for that, because I think that's really where we want to be. So we want to be very protective of these beautiful new souls that are coming. So how do I know this? I'm a risk taker. I'm an intelligent woman. I love history, and I am a scanner, which means that I'm always looking for, okay, so there's the world out there. Oh, there was a little blip. What was that blip about? And then I watch a blip over here, and then I watch a blip over there, and I go, these 3 are connected. And so I put things together, and I'm always about 4 to 5 years ahead of the time. So it was really good in trade shows, and it was really good in marketing to sort of go, hey, we're going to do this. And they go, no, it's not going to work. And I'd sit back and sulk and be totally pissed off. And then 4 years later, it would happen, and I'd go, see, told you guys. So that's sort of how I gather information. What I learned to do since 2010 is, when my intuition tells me something, is to go, thank you, and to go, spot on, got it. So if I get an image, or if I get a hit, or if I wake up in the middle of the night and this whole image drops in, I write it down and I go, why is that here? So I started to partner with something that is different than what we look at from the outside world. So I'm doing internal direction. And then when I get stuck and I'm putting all of this together and I notice that there's these trends, I started to work with a channel that was highly recommended through this very, very skilled group. Like, hey, when you really want to work with her, you go to her. And I thought, okay. So I went to her a couple of times, and I noticed she works with ascended masters. And when one of these voices would come in, or she would use the same voice, but the dialogue, the word choices and the patterning would change, my whole body would sit up and I would go, oh, it's you. I know who you are. And I would write everything down and record it, right? And so then I said, well, can I do some research with you guys? And they're like, we've been hoping you would. So then I got all of these massive notes, and I would sit down and I'd say, so it's going to be an hour and a half, and we're going to go through. I need to know what indigos, crystals, rainbows, and diamonds are. And then I have this online class that I launched, and everyone went, oh my God, too much material. So I pulled it back out. So now I'm refining it so I can put it back out. But it is literally where they came from, what their purpose is, what's going on, and where their pains are, and what their parenting issues are. And so then I could take that into my parenting and create empowerment dialogues, resonance language, how to center yourself and get present before you talk to a millennial, because if you're not present, they won't listen to you. So that's sort of the emphasis of where I put it into practice. But some people think I'm crazy, and I had to sort of let go of that and say, yeah, well, this is going to be really solid information 20 years from now. And I'm just love the fact that I get to be part of bringing it in.
Well, and isn't that really the quintessential indigo experience that you're describing right there? Is people are going to think I'm crazy, and I am ahead of the curve and sort of, let's call it a trendsetter. That's what I used to say about myself. And bringing in this new information in maybe an unpredictable or unconventional way that down the road, history will say, oh yeah, of course. You know, the first time somebody tried to fly an airplane, the masses weren't saying, brilliant idea. They were saying, there's no way that's possible. It's never going to work. And so there's always somebody who's the first of the kind to try something that ends up being revolutionary.
Well, and I'm a visionary and I'm an innovator. So, and I have this background in education and psychology. I am a good public speaker. I am a great storyteller. So it's sort of like, oh man, you really want me to put myself out there and start normalizing this? Thanks a lot, you guys. That was a hell of a big task. Yeah. And, you know, some people are like, do not talk to Denise about this stuff. And other ones are going, what can I do in my classroom? Yeah. I work with school teachers. I work with therapists. I work with other coaches. You know, I'm sharing, like, these are some new approaches to try for how to deal with a child when they're in pain.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of what you're talking about resonates with clients that I work with. You know, I'm thinking about some of the children, not that I've met because I work directly with the parents most of the time, but this sounds like the kids that I'm working with. I talk a lot with parents about how to lead with love instead of trying to be an authoritarian. In fact, I had a coaching call just this morning where that was exactly what we were talking about your child is pushing back and angry because you're trying to tell him what to do. He doesn't want you to tell him what to do, and he is going to continue to get bigger and bigger in his behavior until you take a different approach. And it is so hard for that old school paradigm to understand where these kids are coming from. And yet I often feel like I'm the bridge between the two, because I understand where that old school paradigm is coming from, and yet I really understand where these kids are coming from, and bridging the gap for their parents and giving these parents new understanding of what these kids need. It doesn't mean that parents have to give up everything or acquiesce or roll over and let their kids, you know, run the show, but it's about cultivating a new concept of what respect means and how to get into the world of these children so that they feel seen and valued and not like there's something wrong with them and they need to be different than they were born to be. I
totally agree. One of my greatest coaching experiences is working with, I still work with them, is this couple that come from a very high-tech leadership role. And you know, they've been in predominant world leadership for a long time. And they have a teenager who struggles. And so when we were able to go, hey, sensitivity is genetic. It comes through one or both. Which one of you has this? And start to define what your own skills were and what your pains were when your parents didn't listen. And so that's almost like reparenting. You know, reteaching a parent, like, how can we hold so that you get to see that your life, what worked in your life and what didn't, and then let's see what this beautiful multi-dimensional child of yours needs from you, and how to hold a platform of, I'm here if you need me, I'm curious about what you need, what you see, and how can we collaborate together and create an environment that works for you, which is part-time public school, part-time one-on-one tutoring and online classes, and a job, and we have an equal status in the family because you're really, really smart, and you can see us. You know more about us than we know about you, so teach us what you see. And to go from that clenched, battle to this over 14 months was just beautiful.
It's so satisfying too to watch that transformation happen.
Yeah. So what we're really looking at is not being a child's best friend and not acquiescing, but saying, hey, I'm the mom and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to really fail. I'm going to fail and make big mistakes sometimes. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to you about it. And we're going to figure this out together. And we're going to walk this path. And you need to be honest with me and you need to tell me what you're doing. And I need to be honest with you and tell you when I'm blowing it. And when that works, everything sort of changes because there's a respect. There's I see you as somebody who matters.
Yeah. And isn't that ultimately what respect is I see you and I love you exactly as you are, and who you are matters, and you don't need to be different to be worthy of all of that acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah. So do we have time are we going to wind this down?
I think so. I think unless there's one more last thing that you want to share.
No, well, what I wanted to do was really put out there how empowerment and in understanding how to become an empowerer is one of the key tools that we can use as parents and adults in the workforce, in when we're parenting children, when we're collaborating with friends, is to be able to notice something about that person and then speak to that and say, Melissa, you are so curious and your mind works so fast and it's so beautiful to have conversations with you. Thank you. And then you feel seen and you feel heard. And so how do we keep passing these little love bombs over to someone that doesn't say, hey, I love you, smooch, smooch, but I see something you're doing and I'm handing it to you to own.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so much validation or attempts at validation are about, I'm proud of you. I feel this way when I look at you. And that's not authentic validation.
You're just taking it for yourself. I'm so proud that you are performing the way I need you to.
Exactly. Instead of you looked so confident doing that thing that you just did. You looked like you really enjoyed yourself. You were all lit up inside. Yes. And really seeing that person come alive and mirroring that back to them. It's such a different experience.
And you watch these kids that are imploding. They sit up a little taller. They open up a little bit. Then next thing you know, they're moving around the world in a different level of confidence because they're not failing all the time in your eyes. Because when we see different, unfortunately, especially different in our children, what their children feel is failure.
Yeah.
Disappointment.
Yeah.
Unmet expectations. Those are killers.
Yes.
So we want to put empowerment over there. And that's what I wanted to leave us with is how important that empowerment piece is.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, there are endless hours of conversation that we could really have about that, because that ultimately is, it's putting all of this understanding into action. And
yes.
I really appreciate you sharing all of this. For me, also new information with such clarity and precision. And I'm really hoping that people that are listening to this are stretched in a healthy way and willing to expand the way that they're looking at sensitivity in children and seeing these sort of nuances and understanding that that there are different energies that are on the planet, that we are not all meant to be the same, that there is no normal, there's no box to fit into, there is nothing wrong with these children that are having a very different experience, and that meeting them with love and understanding is really what they're asking for in the way that they're coming forward.
Well, and to know that our world is changing, and it's changing so rapidly, and the really only thing we can do when the outer world is changing is to stabilize our inner world and keep coming at things with love and respect and curiosity, and to do that with our children and to do that with ourselves. Some of us who are older, we've changed. We've seen so much change.
Yes.
And to keep going like, this is cool. What's going to happen next? So to hold for change too.
Yeah. Well, the world that you were born into is certainly different. Even I was born with a black and white TV and a record player, and now I've got everything in the world accessible on my iPhone. So it's
Yeah.
absolutely a different world, and it is constantly changing. And I think you're right that welcoming it and seeing the children as sort of the warriors bringing this change and allowing them to be who they are, that is the ultimate gift. And thank God for these blessed children, because our world can certainly use a little more acceptance and love these days.
I think that they're onto something, and if I had to choose between the way that it looks out there and the way that I see them going, I want to follow them. So I call that parenting forward. Go where they're going. Have them teach you what they know, because they got some cool stuff going on.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. That was wonderful.
Bye for now.
All right. Bye-bye.